What do you think if I say Trump wins, but Canada is the one playing the long game? Well, on paper, Trump slammed the table and Canada backed down on tariffs worth billions looking like they're giving in. But behind the scenes, there's a strategic chess game unfolding with LNG, national pride, steel and car retaliations, and even Chinese cars. It all started with something that sounds pretty dull: the Digital Services Tax, DST. Since 2020, Canada has been keeping an eye on the big tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Meta, aiming to cut 3% of their revenues for selling services here while avoiding taxes. Back then, global negotiation groups like the OECD and G20, the club of the world's largest economies, promised to come up with a unified rule to fairly tax big tech and stop the tax avoidance schemes. But they kept dragging their feet, delaying over and over because everyone wanted a piece of the pie. Eventually, Canada got fed up and passed its own law in 2024, setting up a collection schedule starting the 1st of July, 2025. So, what happened next? Trump flipped out just hours before the deadline. Canada scrapped the tariffs. It looked like a blow to Canada, losing over $7 billion in projected revenue over 5 years. Trump proudly declared victory. "See, I forced them to back down." But the reality, according to former financial advisor Julian Karagassian, this is just a temporary move. Canada didn't want an immediate tariff war, so it made a tactical retreat to keep the negotiation door open. The goal, avoiding direct conflict while still keeping leverage for future talks. Trump gets his moment on Fox News, but Canada holds on to its card. This is the classic take one step back to strike 3 steps forward, maybe even a dozen. While Trump is celebrating, Canada is kicking off its energy independence plan. On the 1st of July, 2025, a Canada Day, no less, the first LG shipment from Kitimat heads off to Asia. The whole country is celebrating, and Trump's probably not too thrilled about it. Kitimat is no small deal. Over $40 billion in investments with major players like Shell and Petronas backing the project. And that's just the beginning. Canada is working on 7 LNG projects, with a goal to exceed 50 million tons per year, growing from zero to a massive export powerhouse. The U.S. currently exports over 100 million tons, but Canada plans to grab a share of that lucrative pie. The Sulisime LNG project, led by Niska Nation and valued at around 20 billion, aims to bring gas to both the Asian and European markets by 2030, from being America's hostage. Canada now wants to become a global supplier. It's not just the government reacting. Canadians are furious. Trump says Canada should be the 51st state. Well, that's not flying with Canadians. An Ipsos survey on the 30th of June, 2025 shows that 77% of Canadians view the U.S. negatively, with nearly 3/4 saying they'll avoid traveling to the U.S. and 60% trusting Prime Minister Carney to handle Trump. Who wouldn't be mad about being publicly insulted with "become my state"? Many families canceled their U.S. trips, opting for domestic travel or Europe instead. Canadian travel agencies are feeling the pinch with falling U.S. tour sales, but Canadians aren't bothered. Fine. This year, we'll visit Newfoundland. It's beautiful, and we won't be called second-class citizens. Trump imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum, causing nearly 1,000 steel jobs to be wiped out, with the industry warning that once a blast furnace shuts down, it's goodbye for good. The 25% tariff on cars caused U.S. car sales in Canada to drop by 30%, and Canadian car exports to the U.S. fell by 23% in just April. In the U.S., the price of cars and household goods rose by about $1,300 per year for each household. Consumers in both countries have become hostages in this tariff war. Canada set a deadline of the 21st of July, 2025. If no deal is reached, they will impose retaliatory tariffs on American goods. The government is also considering reducing tariffs on Chinese cars, turning the market of over 1.8 million cars per year into a new playing field for BYD and Gile. This isn't just a tit-for-tat move. It's a strategic shift, opening the door for America's competitors, 360,000 jobs and $55 billion. That was the number international corporations used as a threat, and the Trump administration obediently bowed its head. Trump and our own government chose to repeal Section 899, also known as the Revenge Bill, not to save America, but to yield to those threatening our economy. The repeal of Section 899 was no diplomatic victory. It was a humiliating capitulation to the pressure of global financiers and the fear of retaliation. It exposes the hollowness of Trump's America First slogan. And its ultimate legacy will be a distorted economic playing field with an unjust tax system, where small and medium-sized businesses are forced to pay higher taxes to cover the perks enjoyed by mega corporations. In the halls of power in Washington, Section 899, the punitive sword Trump proudly vowed to wield to make other nations play fair, has been officially struck from the books. The irony is that the fatal blow didn't come from the opposition, but from the very people he trusted enough to appoint. The move was executed by none other than Scott Bessent, Trump's own hand-picked Treasury Secretary, acting as the administration's enforcer. Bent formally requested that Congress eliminate Section 899, and the Senate swiftly complied. In a classic case of political backstabbing, the very cabinet Trump appointed proceeded to gut a policy designed to shield America, effectively turning a protective pledge into an act of profound disloyalty. Section 899, the Revenge Bill, was designed as an automatic punitive measure. It would impose higher taxes on the passive income of foreign companies with assets in the U.S. if their home country enacted unfair taxes like digital services taxes targeting American tech giants. In essence, it was a big stick. If you dare touch our companies, your companies will pay the price. The official cover story for this surrender was painted with the lofty rhetoric of diplomatic success. Secretary Bessent claimed that repealing the Revenge Bill was justified because the U.S. had secured a historic agreement with the G7 on a 15% global minimum tax. By this logic, with a cooperative solution in place, the unilateral punitive stick became redundant. However, behind this curtain of deceitful pronouncements lies a much starker truth. Immediately after the announcement, analysts quickly pointed to a more sinister backstory. Perhaps the loudest voices of opposition came not from Paris or Tokyo, but from Silicon Valley and Seattle. Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, and other tech giants, the biggest beneficiaries of global tax avoidance, saw Section 899 as a potential disaster. They knew this policy could trigger retaliatory tariff wars, disrupt their complex global supply chains, and erode the competitive edge they had built on the foundation of tax dodging. Perhaps the pressure from K Street lobbyists, the late-night phone calls, and the advice from the puppet masters was strong enough to break the will of an administration that prided itself on being tough. Donald Trump, the man who vowed to make corporations pay their fair share, seemed to tremble the moment global financiers expressed their displeasure. The promise of America first vanished into thin air when billions of dollars in profits were put on the line. As it turns out, America First only applies when it doesn't inconvenience the people who are really pulling the strings. If corporate pressure was the push from within, fear from abroad was the final blow. The G7 nations and other major trading partners didn't just agree. Diplomatic language was merely the surface. Behind it, there was likely a quiet threat. It seems they were prepared to unleash devastating retaliatory tariffs on everything from American cars and agricultural products to industrial goods if the Revenge Bill was ever activated. While the Global Business Alliance, representing international firms like Toyota and Nestle, celebrated saving America from losing 360,000 jobs, the reality is that the bill for this betrayal will be passed on to everyday Americans and Main Street businesses. Scrapping Section 899 means voluntarily giving up a potential revenue stream of tens of billions of dollars per year from the planet's wealthiest players. That money could have been used to rebuild crumbling bridges, fund schools, or ease the burden on taxpayers. Now, that budget gap will be filled with only one thing: debt. The national debt, already at a record $36.22 trillion by the end of 2024 and steadily climbing, will continue to swell. Essentially, The government chose to give the richest corporations a pass, while leaving a massive IOU for our children and grandchildren. In reality, multinational corporations seem to operate from a predator's playbook. They don't evade taxes like a common criminal. They use a complex global system legitimized by the very legal loopholes they lobbied and paid for. Their most insidious trick is called profit shifting. How it works is both sophisticated and ruthless. A multinational corporation may be headquartered in the U.S., but registers subsidiaries in tax havens like Ireland, Bermuda, or the Cayman Islands. The real profits of these giants don't come from selling a physical phone, but from brand value, patents, and software, all intangibles. And they exploit this masterfully. Imagine this. A global company sells ads in the U.S. and generates $1 billion in profit. Instead of booking that profit in the U.S. and paying the high corporate tax rate, its American subsidiary pays a massive royalty fee to another subsidiary in Ireland simply for the right to use the parent company's brand and algorithms. This fee is skillfully calculated to nearly wipe out the $1 billion profit in the U.S. As a result, the American company reports near zero profit and pays no tax. That $1 billion in profit has now been shifted to Ireland, where the corporate tax rate is a fraction of the U.S. rate and can be even lower thanks to special deals. The consequence is that these corporations earn billions from the American market, benefiting from our infrastructure, legal system, and workforce, yet pay a pittance in taxes. They are global citizens when it comes to making money and dodging taxes, but demand the protection of America first when they feel threatened. This fight is rigged against the small guy from the start. And finally, as large corporations continue to avoid taxes, the financial burden of running the country doesn't disappear. It simply gets shifted. The government, to cover the deficit, will be forced to raise taxes on those who can't run, the middle class and working families. The tax bill that global companies dodged in a tax haven will reappear as a higher income tax or increased property tax for a regular American family. Trump didn't make corporations pay their share. He simply forwarded the bill to the very people who voted for him. The collapse of the revenge bill is more than just a policy failure. It is a moral indictment. It exposes the true nature of the populism that Donald Trump represents. A charade staged for public support, but ready to be discarded the moment the interests of the powerful elite are threatened. It reveals a cowardly Donald Trump, one who talks tough to crowds but bows his head to CEOs in the boardroom. A man willing to betray his own core principle, America first, just to appease global financiers and avoid a real fight on the world stage. The revenge bill is dead. But what was truly buried along with it was the belief that Trump was a champion for the common man. Its legacy is a bitter reminder that in his world, America first seems to come with fine print, as long as it doesn't upset the people who really hold the power. In just about 3 months, 200,000 Canadian tourists have disappeared from the state of Maine in the U.S., not because of bad weather or a pandemic. This marks the beginning of an economic war where the weapon is tightly shut. Wallets and silence is the strongest form of protest. When President Donald Trump launched the trade war with Canada, he probably envisioned nothing more than tariff numbers, arrogant tweets, and negotiations that he believed he would dominate with blind confidence. He never anticipated the situation that was unfolding. A chilling silence with an entire nation simmering with anger, transforming peaceful Canadians into professional soldiers in an economic war. Meanwhile, Trump thought it would be nothing more than a symbolic response unworthy of concern. He was wrong. He was disastrously wrong. And as the declining numbers began to sting, and when the lobster restaurants in Maine felt an eerie emptiness, Governor Janet Mills of the state spoke out. She didn't use harsh words, but chose a wiser tactic, a heartfelt appeal, attempting to tap into the long-standing friendship that Trump was desperately trying to destroy. She painted a picture of friends, small businesses being hurt, and how the Canadians were targeting the wrong people. And so when people stop coming to Maine, particularly from Canada, from the maritime provinces, they're not hurting Donald Trump. They're not hurting the powers that be in Washington. They're hurting their friends here in Maine. At first glance, Governor Mills' pleas seemed very sincere, a desperate effort to salvage the situation. She begged Canadians to look at the familiar faces in Maine rather than the arrogant one in the White House. However, this emotional appeal failed miserably under closer scrutiny because it was based on a fundamental mistake, a naivety, or perhaps a deliberately cultivated naivety about what was really going on. The plea failed because it completely misunderstood the nature of the issue. This was no longer a simple economic disagreement. This was a protest about dignity. Firstly, it misjudged the victim and the target. Mills wanted us to believe that the people of Maine were innocent victims caught in the crossfire. But for the Canadians, it is they and their national sovereignty who are the direct victims of Trump's arrogance. The boycott was not an impulsive act, but a carefully calculated response. Mills attempted to separate the people of Maine from the federal government, but that is an unrealistic logic. In a trade war, border states are the economic battlegrounds. Mills either intentionally or unintentionally downplayed the purpose and strategy of the action. "You're not sending a message to Washington," she claimed. A laughably misguided statement. The truth is the exact opposite. This is precisely a strategic message carried out by millions of ordinary people. By withdrawing economically, Canadians are creating a bottom-up pressure, a powerful undercurrent. Businesses and local governments will have to speak up, pressuring their senators and representatives, which in turn will impact Washington. This is a form of wallet lobbying on a national scale, a lesson in direct democracy that perhaps some U.S. politicians have forgotten. And most importantly, Mills's appeal overlooked the decisive factor, national pride, a force stronger than any economic interest. The most ironic thing is that while Governor Mills urged Canadians not to hurt American businesses, she herself had to admit that the real culprit causing the economic pain was none other than Trump's policies. Her admission, almost a confession, inadvertently exposed the charade he was trying to set up. A massive tax heist, not the words of a left-wing activist, but from a newspaper that symbolizes American capitalism. It's hard to find a clearer acknowledgement of the absurdity of this policy. This quote exposed the core contradiction and hypocrisy in Mills's appeal. The biggest harm to the U.S. economy isn't caused by Canadian tourists staying home, but by the tariffs signed in Washington. She didn't stop there. Her focus was on friendship and business relationships, but the focus of the Canadians right now is on Trump's disdain for their count. This way, the end of March, they had an editorial that said, "These tariffs are nothing but a tax. They are a large tax heist. A large tax heist. And the taxes on the American people." She also provided specific figures on the pain that her own state was enduring. "And our construction costs have gone up by about 10% alone in recent months. That's hurtful. It's painful." Yes, Governor, it is painful. And this means that even without a single Canadian boycotting, businesses in Maine have been hurt by the policies of their own president. Your call for Canadians not to hurt their friends becomes hollow, almost ridiculous, because the U.S. government acted first, and it acted against its own people. In this context, the Canadian boycott is not the root cause of the problem. It's merely a catalyst, the spark that ignited the dry grass Trump had already piled up. It didn't create the issue, but it exposed it to the light for everyone to see. This makes Canada's resistance smarter and far more effective as it exploits the very weaknesses, the absurdities in the opponent's policy. And all of this is happening while Trump continues to boast about the slogan "America First." But if America First means taxing American builders, driving up product costs for American manufacturers, and forcing small businesses to bear the costs of political ego, then exactly what is being protected? Canada didn't start this war. The Canadian boycott, quiet yet revealing, has exposed this bitter truth more clearly than ever before. If tariffs are an economic attack, then Trump's arrogant statements are an assault on Canada's patriotism. The idea of turning Canada into the 51st state, even though it was said as a joke, was no laughing matter. For a sovereign nation, it was a profound disrespect, a denial of their entire history, culture, and identity. His comments about making Canada a state has got a lot of people staying home. A brief yet entirely accurate assessment. Trump made two fatal mistakes. He understated the impact of the insult and miscalculated the economic consequences for the very workforce he claimed to protect. The 51st state comment was the red line. It was no longer about trade. It was a denial of the sovereignty and history of an entire nation. This moment turned a trade dispute into a confrontation over identity. It unified the Canadian resistance, giving them a legitimate reason to act. Who could blame them? Would you vacation in a country where the leader speaks of annexing your nation as if it were a real estate deal? What's even more hypocritical is that Trump portrayed himself as a champion for American workers.